Hello everybody, welcome back. You caught me right in the middle of painting this wall. We're going to get right into rolling and how to make that happen. So let's get right into it. I just finished up cutting in. Cutting in is the process of painting all of the perimeter edges. We don't do that with a full-size roller. We do it with a angled brush and a mini roller. And all of this was done to prepare for rolling with a full-sized roller. We're going to use today a 9-inch roller on an extension pole, and this is going to get us through the basics of how to use a roller, how to load it, unload it on the wall, smooth it out, and finish it out. And I've got my demo wall here. It's not a large space, so keep in mind that whatever we're doing here can transfer to a larger area very easily. It's a simple number of steps that can be repeated over larger areas, surfaces, and even turn corners and do entire rooms. So I'll go ahead and put this away. I've got my 9-inch roller here, and if you remember, we had to prime this roller so it's damp and ready to go to accept paint. The first time you're loading this roller is going to take a little more paint and time than the follow-up loading of the roller. I've got it already on my extension pole. It's locked on, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in my tray really quick. There's two parts of this tray that we need to pay attention to and understand how they work. So the paint is already loaded in the tray. It is resting in the deep end of the tray, which we're going to call the well. There is a ramp that comes up from that well, and the paint we're going to draw up onto the ramp. Most of that paint will flow back into the well, but enough of the paint will stay on the ramp that we can load it onto the roller cover. And this is a pretty important step here that we do this properly. We do not want to submerge that roller cover into the paint. So I'm just touching the edge of it in the well, and I'm trying to drag that paint up the ramp. And as I drag it up the ramp, it's going to start pushing into the roller cover. I can work it back and forth. Like I said, this first pass on a fresh roller is going to be the hardest to get it completely soaked. What we're looking for is a completely saturated roller cover. And I'll know that when I have a nice, steady, or even coat on this guy. What you don't want to do is to sink that roller cover into the well. What that's going to do is force paint into the roller cage, in between the cover and the cage. That paint we can't do anything with, and it's going to be dripping out and in the way. So at the point that we've got this roller completely loaded for the first time, we can go ahead and set up to make a pass on the wall. This is an open-ended roller cover or a roller frame, so I have this end that's always available to move close to an edge. So if I'm working near an edge or any obstruction, I'm always going to point that open end towards that edge. I'm going to start here, and I'm always starting in the middle of my wall section. I'm going to roll up, and then I'm going to roll down. So we loaded the roller. What I just did there was unload the majority of the paint that was on that cover onto the wall. At this point, we need to spread that paint out. So we're loading the roller, we're unloading the roller, then we need to spread that paint out. We need an even coat on this wall. Obviously, that's more paint that's needed in this stripe, so I can extend it out to either side as I'm going up and down, and I'm moving that paint to a wider section. So that much paint is going to cover that much wall surface. And at this point, I'm going to start running it down to the edges, but not onto those edges. I need to stop short of my ceiling, any trim edges. And at this point, right here, I have spread that paint out. This is not finished by any means, but now we have a fairly even coat distributed over a large and even area of the wall. It carries all the way up to the top, all the way up to the bottom, and has a certain width. Now we can go ahead, we have a choice. We can go ahead and smooth this paint out, or we can do another pass and then smooth it all out at the same time. I'm going to do one more pass and then we'll do our finish passes. Once again, we're loading the roller. This time, it will not take a fraction of the time that it did the first time. We're still staying out of the well, only using the ramp to distribute the paint on the roller. I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm not going to start right here on this edge. I'm going to pull it out a ways because I have a lot of paint on this roller. I'm going to go up and then come down. That's a majority of our paint on the wall. I've unloaded it. Now we're going to spread it out. So I'm going to extend that stripe out to either side of the pass that I made. And I've got a little spot here. We're feathering this out and we're trying to create the most even distribution of paint that we can. I'm using a pole here today in a situation where it might not be completely necessary. I like an extension pole for a couple of reasons. It allows me to reach above my head and below my waist down to the floor without it having to bend over or stretch. It saves a lot of energy and it's going to make for an easier job when you're doing this hour after hour, day after day. Another reason to use an extension pole is it puts you, the person that's evaluating the work, at a distance, and this distance is a great place to kind of check, make sure that everything's happening the way you want it to, look for problems or defects in the finish. So those two things make an extension pole a great tool to use in almost any rolling situation. I have one more area here to roll, and we're going to go through the process of the four-step process, which is loading the roller, unloading the roller on the wall, spreading out the paint evenly, and then smoothing it out to a finish. So first I'll go ahead and load the roller, and I'm dragging this paint up the ramp, trying to get it distributed as evenly as possible on this cover as I can. And now I'm ready. You might give it a little bit of a twirl as you're coming out of the tray. Make sure there's no drips. Fully loaded roller starting in the middle of the wall. I'm going to work it up and then come back down. And I'm starting in the middle of this section because now I have the majority of the paint from this roller on the wall. Now I want to feather that paint out to both sides. You would never start over here. It's going to end up with too much paint. This will allow us. So now I'm going to spread the paint out, and I'm just kind of working it from the center out. And we can work it down to the floor and up as far as we can to the ceiling without touching. And now I'm going to work it from this side over. You want nice long passes. You don't want to be starting and stopping. This does not create a good finish, wastes a lot of time and energy. At this point, I'm going to turn my roller around. I always want the open end of my roller near whatever edge or perimeter that I have. Now the paint's all applied on the surface. It's fairly even. We need to smooth it out to a finish. I'm going to do that with several passes all in the same direction, very light touch. And I'm really paying attention here to all of the edges. I'm looking for any paint ribbons, which are going to be thin buildup of paint. They will always happen right at the edge of the roller. And they come from too much paint or too much pressure on the roller. So as I'm finishing this or laying it out, this is where your eye comes in handy, and you have to be very careful not to walk away from something. I see a tiny spot here. I'm going to run over that again. And I can work this all the way down. This process might be the most important step here, because however you leave this when you walk away is what it's going to look like once it dries. So any problems you have to find, identify, and fix them right now. As I get close to this other end of the wall, I'm going to go ahead and flip my roller around with the open end on this side. That allows me to get a lot closer to this other edge. the closed end, or the end of the roller cage with the shaft coming into it, is really going to restrict you from getting close to anything. I'm not going to roll over any outlets. That is bad practice. So we're going to skip past, and we're going to roll up to any outlets or junction boxes. And then at some point you can stand back, take a look at it, and make sure that it's finished, and then you can move on to the next wall, the next section, or say the next ceiling of the room. So at this point, I've got my first coat rolled on this wall. We need to stop here and let this dry. We don't need to continue to mess with it. The one thing that you can really cause problems for yourself is if you get to a point where the wall is starting to tack or dry, and then you go back and try to fix something. That can create problems that carry way beyond the scope of a normal job. So at this point, I'm okay with it. We're going to stop and let that dry. What I do want to mention though is, while it's drying, is this idea of how to hold a extension pole with a roller frame on it and a roller cover. What's the proper grip of this tool? And there's a couple of ways to do this, and every painter has their way or their tips or tricks that they use. I think of this as a tool that is a right-handed tool. If I'm right-handed, it can be a left-handed tool if you're left-handed. It doesn't change anything other than it's the reverse of it. I'm right-handed, and your dominant hand will always be on the back of the extension pole. That is where you're going to, believe it or not, get a lot of control. It's not intuitive. If you think about it, you would think that the hand that was closest to the roller cage would give you more control. But this is where all of your pressure and feel comes from, is from back here. I'm going to use what's called an underhanded grip on this extension pole with my left hand, or non-dominant hand. It's going to be still on the pole. I'm not going to be holding up here. I need to give that roller frame some space to work. So I've got this hand overhanded, this hand underhanded, and this is going to allow me a lot of finesse when I'm rolling. I have seen, and I also use it myself, if I'm doing certain positions or certain heights, I will do an overhanded grip on my non-dominant hand. You have to be careful with this position because you now have a lot of force that you can apply with this arm, and force when you're rolling does not necessarily lead to a quality job. So make sure if you're using this particular stance that you're not over pressuring the roller cover on the wall. That can lead to paint ribbons, defects, and even drips and mess. And that is your two choices for this. If you're left-handed, it would be this way and this way. Very simple. You're doing this a lot for a long period of time, so make sure you're paying attention. Find what works for you and use that to create a consistent paint job. The beauty of an extension pole is that I can make it any length that I want. This is the shortest length that this pole can be, but there's a release lever here, and there's an internal part that will snap into several locations. So if I have a high ceiling or a large or tall wall that I'm working on, I can put it as in this position or at this length, and it will help me to get that job done without having to have a ladder or waste a lot of energy reaching.
This video was made possible through the financial support from Benjamin Moore.
This video is a production of Trade Skills U, all rights reserved. If you provide instruction in the construction trades and have a need for videos like these, please contact us at tradeskillsu.com.